Hey, what's going on everybody? This is G The Hypersapien, and in this video I'm painting Griff Oberwald. So these are the blue paints that I'm going to use. So we're going to go over basically the gloves, parts of the pants, and a few little other items on this, like the shield on his helmet. So I went with a more classic scheme for him, more like the Griff that I remember. I just thought I've seen a lot of people use the new method or the new colour scheme, so I wanted to go back to the old school 2nd edition, 3rd edition style that I remember him being. So we just go over the gloves here. So I started with the darkest blue that I had. Now I'm starting to highlight or bring up with the lighter blues. So I did mix these a little bit so there's not as much of a huge jump. Normally when I highlight, I mix them with the previous colour a little bit, just so you can gradually see the transition of colour. So I'm starting to bring it up to a lighter blue. Here I'm going across most of the pants, but I'm trying to leave some of that dark blue in the creases. But some other places, like the gloves, the edges of the glove, and you can see here that I'm putting it in the creases of the pants, but leaving that dark blue there. And yeah, I do that with the gloves as well, mainly on the fingers, and leave the dark blue in between and the creases of the glove. And I did mix this with medium, like Lamium medium, just to get a nice smooth coat. So now I'm going to use a black shade. So I'm going to go over all this blue with a nice dark black shade. Now just make sure this doesn't pull too badly, but I do want to leave quite a lot in the creases, and obviously try and wick away a fair bit of it off the flat surfaces, but try and let it build in those creases. So now this is what Griff looks like with the black shade all over him. So it darkens down that blue. Now we've got two different reds here. I really like Mephiston red, it's a really nice colour, and Evil Suns is a nice highlight colour. Now you don't have to use Citadel paints, you can use just a darker red and a close but lighter red, one that will highlight nicely. So yeah, I go over all of this ribbon, so you want to make sure you take your time and you get all of this ribbon, because it's really folded and it's got loads of turns to it, but that's what it looks like when it's finished. And now I put a bit of a shade over this again, so we can see that I've got black shade again, or Known Oil, but you could use another brand if you wish. So we want to go over this ribbon all with this black wash here, just to darken it down, bring out the detail, give us a lot of shadow and shading. So I've got a dark brown here, so I'm going to go over quite a few areas, and this is to prepare all these areas for the gold. Now we could use gold over the undercoat or the prime, but if you were to say make a mistake, like you leave it a little bit visible, it's not going to be white, it's going to be brown, so it's going to be a bit more natural. But also it's going to be really nice to leave some of this in the shadow area. It'll give me some quick and easy shadows without too much work. Old school, more retro style Griff that I'm using, he has quite a lot of gold on him. I guess the new one has a lot of gold on him as well, but I'm going to go over this eagle and any other areas that are going to be gold. Yet again, you can choose your favourite brand of paints, but this Rhinox hide is really nice. It's a really nice base coat. It's a really nice dark brown, quite a rich brown. So they're all the areas that I've done brown. So I've done all the areas that are going to be prepared for gold, and I've done some of his belts. So he's got straps on his hands, on his armour pieces on his arms, and then obviously around his waist. And I even done the boots. So the top of the boots I'm going to do gold, like the steel cap, and then I've done the brown for the actual leather part. So now we take a couple of skin tones, so I just grabbed a darker and a lighter one. Now I didn't want them too dark, like a Bugman's Glow or a really dark rose sort of colour skin tone. But I applied the darker one out of the two. Basically it's the base coat, so I'm going to go over obviously all of his face. Now as mentioned before, I use medium to basically thin down the paint. Now you want to use a smaller brush here than the previous step, so I use a small brush. Don't overload the brush. I've got a piece of paper towel near me that I can wipe some off if I've got too much on my brush. So now, like the last few steps, I've got two different greens. I've got a darker one and obviously a light one. So I go over this leaf decoration on his helmet with the dark green. So just use yet again, just like the face, a small brush here. Just less work, just take your time and just go over this area. Now I turn the model upside down here just so you can see, even though it's kind of straightforward, it's just the same on the opposite side. I just turn the model because of the camera, the way I'm recording, it's hard otherwise to see. So I wasn't going to add this footage, but I thought why not? It's nice to show these little details, that it can be done, just take your time. Now this is what it looks like when the dark green is all over those leaf decoration. Not quite sure the technical term. Now I've got the light green. Now I'm just trying to go the tips and also the edges, trying to leave that dark green towards the bottom of these. Also it's got like a separation in between, which I tried to leave dark green to make it look like a leaf. So I take a bone colour now and I go over the teeth. I did this off camera because it's hard to do really small details on camera. And then I took a white and I tried to pick out the individual teeth, trying to leave a gap in between each one. Now I use contrast here over the flesh, but you could use Brightland Flesh Shade or any other brown or flesh wash that you like. I just thought this is easy, having a flesh contrast. So now I'm going to start doing some layers. So I take my red again and I start building the red layer. Now obviously I leave the shadow areas without going over them in between the creases of the cloth. And I try to keep it towards the bottom on the first part that I've shown. Now I'm going over the edges, trying to edge highlight all these different folds. So as you can see, I'm pushing the paintbrush towards the bottom of the cloth there, because the last place that the paintbrush leaves is going to leave the most paint. And then I'm trying to sort of obviously blend it in a bit. So I tried to do the sort of tips of this fold in the cloth here, edge highlighting, just trying to have some fun with it. Going on the tips of these areas, bringing out a bit of the detail. You can see that I've sort of added a bit there in the middle and the tips and the edges of this, and edge highlight all these folds. You can see all these twisty and turny parts of this ribbon, so edge highlight all of that, trying to leave that shadow in between. Now I'm going to bring out a bit more detail, so I'll go over this a couple of times just to build up that colour. So I go around all these edges, but then you see I start going into the middle in these creases, trying to leave a bit of a shadow in between. I go over this another time, so I go over this area a couple of times, maybe 2 or 3 times, just to bring up that colour a bit more. But you can go as many times as you want. If one time is good enough for you, you can leave it there, or just a few times, because obviously when the paint dries it all blends together a lot more, so do it a few times until you're happy. That's what it looks like. Now it's kind of got some really nice bright areas. So now I'm going to use one of my favourite colours from Citadel, Retributed Gold, but you can use any gold that you like, but I really like this gold, and I'm going to show you how I do my gold. So I'll go over the brown. As you can see, it applies quite nicely. It is still a bit transparent, like I guess a lot of metallic can be, but I'm not going to chuck it on really thick and just ruin the model and make it look not smooth and all that sort of stuff. So I just put a nice smooth coat down, and you'll see when I do the second coat that it really pops. So now I'll go over the steel cap, or whatever you want to call that little bit of metal on his shoe. So we go over that, just another nice smooth coat on the tips. We're going to go over all the brown with gold anyway. Obviously, besides the straps on the belts and the part of his shoe, that's all leather. But I'm sure you can work out what's what. But yeah, that seems to pop quite nicely. But you'll see as I put this second coat on that it really makes it rich. Now that second coat just does wonders. It really brings out that gold. Now we go over these Shin Guards. Obviously we had our gold here. Pretty much all areas are going to need 2 coats, maybe even more. So that's why you put it on really thin. Now I did leave a bit of brown on the Shin Guard just to see if I liked it. I ended up changing that. But you can see why I did the brown as well, because I've left a bit in the shadow. Thought it would really make those wing parts stand out. So I just grab all those little feathery parts and leave some brown in the shadow. I thought it looked really nice. Now I'll do a second coat here. And then I do obviously the other Shin Guards and those little decorations on his belt. I did them off camera, didn't want the video too long. I just thought I'd show you and then you can work out the rest yourself. So we go around the helmet now. Now I didn't do those ropey parts on camera. You can see around his shoulder pads and he has it around his waist. But they're basically like ropes. So I dabbed on the gold but left a bit of brown in between all of it. It was just hard to do that on camera because it's kind of fiddly, those parts. Now his head crest, this eagle, so I want to try and leave some of the brown here as well. So I go across his beak, the top and the sides of the eagle's face, and I try and leave some brown. I do it here as well on the chest. I try and pick out each of these, the feather on the crest. So I'm trying to pick out each feather but leave some brown in between. So I had to do some of this off camera because it's really fiddly, this part. It's obviously really small, this detail. So I use a small brush as well. But you can see that I've left a lot of brown on that crest. And around the eye of the eagle, I've left some brown just so you can really see that detail. Obviously I'm going to do the rest of these wings here. Now I didn't show you how to do the whole wings, it's kind of obvious this part, but you pick out the details, the edges, and basically cover it all. But what I do is I'll try and leave some of that brown in between the feathers, just like the other steps that I told you, just a bit of a easy shadow really. You can use the edge of your brush as well for some of that. So now I was a little bit messy with the gold here, but I knew that I'd be putting silver on these shoulder pads here. So as long as the paint wasn't too thick, obviously I'm not slapping it on too crazy. But I did all the silver areas, which are parts of the cuffs on his arm, his main armour, and his shoulder pads. So here's a couple of shots of all the steps up until now. You really see the gold really is nice, it pops. Having the silver, you know, mellows it out a little bit so it's not all gold. So now we grab our good old black shade again. So we're going to go over silver. Black shade looks really nice on silver. I do a little bit of gold with this, but I'll do another step that I'll show you with the gold. So I do a little bit here on the eagle on his chest just to bring it out and have a bit of shadow around it. Obviously on the silver parts, on his helmet as well. In between that green to make it pop, and all the little, like on the top of the helmet has a bit of gold that meets the silver, so I've done a bit of wash in there just to separate them more. And his shoulder pads, and then obviously on his arm cuffs, or his armor plates on his arm, whatever you want to call it. So I added a bit of black wash, as you can see, up under the two shoulder pads that meet as well. Some areas just look nice with a black wash, a bit more shadow. Now I actually put some on his hands and fingers here. You see I wiped a little bit off the gold there. So I put it on these leather areas as well, these straps that hold those armor plates on, and obviously he has a belt. Yeah, I tried to put on the blue on his gloves here, and I put it in between the fingers just to really make his fingers pop more. So now I've got this lighter brown. I'm going to go around the shoe. Now I don't spend too long here, but I go around all the edges of the shoe. Leave obviously again some of that dark brown in the shadow. So the sole of the shoe separating from the main part of the shoe, and each has this part on the back of the shoe that I did as well. But now we're going to get our good old shade again, and I'm going to go over these light areas. So I did it on the belt, straps on his arm. I'm just adding black wash anywhere just to add a bit of a shadow. So you can see that I've gone around and done it to the shoe. Just makes those darker areas and the brown separated a lot more. I'm just going around anywhere here, and I feel I need to wick some away or add some. So now I add Doomball Brown. Basically it's a reddish brown, so if there's any equivalent that you like, you can use yours, but this is a nice brown that has a bit of a red tinge to it. So I wanted it different from the other browns that I've used, but I wanted the ball to kind of have a red look to it a bit. Now I did leave the dark brown in between the layers of the ball in the creases. So now I use blue and red wash. Now I don't have Citadel ones. I have army painter washes and they're quite nice anyway. But I put red over the ball just to make it a little bit more red. And then obviously I go over all these red areas. Now I did use the black wash, but I thought just to make the red pop and the blue pop a bit more, we'll use a wash over them. So I just go over all these areas. Now I go over his crazy ribbon here. Looks like it's blowing in the wind. But I go over here with the red wash as well. Just hopefully it will blend everything in and it will just make that red pop a bit more. Now I do the same but with the blue here. Just be careful around the gold. If you do get any on, just wipe with your finger or a wet brush if you can. Now this is my gold recipe that I was talking about when I did the gold. So I use Reichland over gold. Some people use sepia or like Agrax or a brown wash. I find this flesh wash really makes the gold rich and just how I personally like it. You can do how you want if you prefer browns, sepias, but you'll see when it dries, just this is how I like to do my gold now. I really like Retributed gold. It is a bit expensive, even for Citadel paints. It's a little bit more than the rest of the range. But I found this and like this recipe, so I use Reichland Flesh Shade as the wash. It just makes it really rich, but it does dull it down using the wash. It's not as cartoony or whatever word you want to use, you know, it's quite bright without the wash. It kind of tones and blends all the other colours together. But yeah, that's the complete Griff Oberwald. I could keep on building up the layers if I want. I didn't want the video to go too long. But yeah, let me know what you think. As always, I appreciate you watching. This was G The Hypersapien, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers.